Hello, and thanks for tuning in to Trempealeau County Outdoors Season 2, Megan. We've made it.
Yes.
One full season, full circle. We're back doing our summer segment. We're going to be talking about boating safety today and boating registration as well. So if we could just get a quick update from you on what I need to do to register my boat, what types of vessels do need the registration, and placement of the registration on the vessel.
Sure. So we're on the water right now, so I can't show exactly where it needs to go, but motorboats do need to be registered. That is a requirement. Just like if you drive your automobile down a road, it needs to be registered. So all motorboats in the state of Wisconsin must be registered. To do the registration, you can do that online over or go into a DNR service center and take care of that, or by mail. It's important that you make sure that you have your vessel registered before you head out on the water.
Sure. That's an annual registration?
Nope, it's every 3 years.
Every 3 years,
Yep.
okay.
Yep, so it's something that you want to make sure. The big thing with those registrations is I like to remind folks that they expire at the end of March of the year printed on the sticker. So if it says, if it says 2018, it actually expired in March of 2018, so it's no longer a valid registration. So that registration would have needed to be renewed.
Okay.
And one common question that I get is, I just bought a new boat. The registration sticker on it says it's good until 2020.
Sure.
Do I have to do anything? And the answer is yes. The legal requirement is that when you take ownership of a boat, you have to transfer that registration into your name, even if it still has a valid sticker on it till 2020 or whatever the year is.
Now, will you be issued a new number then, or do they just keep the same number?
It's the same number, but it's now registered, documented in your name.
Okay.
And that is a legal requirement to do so.
Gotcha.
And that, like I said, can be done online or at a service center or by mail.
Okay. So you might also be realizing that we're wearing life jackets out here today. Yours is a little more slimlined and discreet as my blaze orange one here. But either way, it's doing what it should be, which is protecting me in case something were to happen on the vessel today. Can you tell me a little bit about who's required to wear life jackets, and maybe a little bit about picking out a life jacket so you can make sure proper fitment for your activity? Yeah,
so life jackets are very important. Not only are they important for safety, but it's also a legal requirement for any boat, whether it's a kayak, canoe, motorboat. Any vessel on the water needs to have a life jacket on board for each person that's in the boat. So if you have 3 individuals in the boat, you have to have 3 wearable life jackets. Those life jackets, not only do you have to have them on board, but they have to be of the proper fit for the folks on your boat. So if you have 3 people and 2 of them are under the age of 5, adult life jackets aren't going to fit them. So you have to make sure that you have the appropriate size life jackets for them. And they also have to be serviceable. They can't be full of holes, the flotation falling out. You know, if they would need to be put to use, they need to be capable of doing what they're designed to be doing. So every person in the boat needs to have at least 1 wearable life jacket for them. Wearing them is the best. There is no legal requirement to wear them. They have to be readily accessible on the boat in case you would need them, but it is always a good idea to wear them. On bodies of water that are federally controlled, like the Mississippi is, there is a Coast Guard law, federal law, that requires anyone under the age of 13 to wear their life jacket when the boat's underway. So that is the one regulation. Different states do have different laws on that, so it's important, especially since we're on boundary waters here with other states, to make sure that if you're on their side of the state line, that you follow their regulations for that. And then any boat over 16 feet needs to have a throwable PFD, so that's the seat cushion, and I actually have one right behind you, but it's a seat cushion type. So it's a type 4 PFD. That's for 16 feet and over, but if you have a boat that's 12 feet and you want to have one, it's always a good idea. Those are really important, so that way if someone does go overboard, you can at least throw that out to them.
What about paddleboards, kayaks, canoes, things like that? Are same regulations in effect for the life jacket, or is it different?
Yep, so your kayaks, canoes, paddle boards, they're all becoming very popular. You have to have a life jacket with those too for each occupant on those. Yep.
Excellent. Excellent to know, especially like I said, the popularity of some of these water sports. And you know, main thing is to keep people safe out there so they can continue enjoying the sport. And just kind of go back to some of the boating safety things. Are there safety classes, and who should be taking the safety classes for operating a boat?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, again, we have a reoccurring theme of safety, especially when we talk about boating. You know, boating safety is very important to us, and anyone who was born after January 1st, 1989 is required to take a boating safety class.
Trying to do the math real quick there, and it's not working.
And is required to take the boater education course that can be done online. It's a really great course, and that is required. When you successfully complete the course, you get a certificate saying that you've completed that, and it's a requirement to carry that with you when you're out boating. And show it to law enforcement upon request.
And we've been talking about boating, but let's talk a little bit about the personal watercrafts, the PWCs. They're very popular around the Mississippi area, especially. Are there different regulations when I'm operating a craft as that?
Yep, and that's where one of the life jacket requirements does come into play. If you are operating a PWC or a passenger on a PWC, you have to be wearing a life jacket. There's no exceptions. You have to wear your life jacket if you're on a PWC.
Okay.
So in a motorboat, not necessarily, but on a PWC you have to. PWCs have lanyards. For if you fall off, it will shut the engine off. You must wear your lanyard, have that attached to you, so if you do fall off, your PWC will stop. And
that would be good.
Yes, very good. You know, and for PWC operators, a reminder that there is certain distances that you can't go between boats, folks being towed on a ski or tube, and that they are not allowed to be operated between sunset and sunrise.
Oh.
So there can't be any PWCs out on the water during those times.
Gotcha. And that brings me to another question of mine, which for those of us who don't spend a lot of time on the water, maybe just a couple times throughout the summer months, the lighting of boats and how to read another boat coming toward you so you know which side to pass. Can we talk about that just for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things there are requirements for navigational lights between the hours of sunset and sunrise. There is a white 360, it's called the stern light. It's a white light, it's 360 degrees of visibility. And then up on the bow, there's a red light and a green light. And in the boater safety course, they actually teach you what those lights mean. So that if we were out here and it was dark and we saw a white light and a green light, we would know which direction that boat was heading. Or if we just saw the white light, we would know which direction is coming. So they do mean something. They're that communication between boaters at night of, one, there's a boat out here, and then two, which direction they're going, so you know the rules of the road that way. So they're very important. And
especially if a boat's very slow moving, like we're almost trolling here, you know, so it's kind of hard to tell which direction a boat may be going at night if you just see the two lights out there. But if you're familiar with the way it's lighted, you know the stern from the front of the boat.
Yep. And in the boat safety course, they teach you about that, which is really great to know. And then also, you know, I try and remind folks that any lights that interfere with those navigational lights are actually a violation. So if you have like docking lights for a pontoon, or you know, any spotlights or anything that might drown out those navigational lights, those aren't allowed to be used when you're boating at night, because it gets back to that being able to communicate with other boaters out there.
Right. And new, I shouldn't say new, a change in some regulation this year that has to do if you're if you're pulling someone in a tube or a water ski or a wakeboard or something like that, and that has to do with the spotter, is that correct?
Yep, so historically in Wisconsin it's been a requirement that you have a competent observer if you're pulling a tuber or water skier or wakeboarder or a similar device, that there be the boat operator and then there be another person who's actually watching that skier and can communicate with the boat
Sure.
operator if they go down, if there's an emergency, if there's another boat coming that maybe the boat operator doesn't see. Again, getting back to safety, but recently there has been a law change in Wisconsin that allows you to use a wide view mirror.
Okay.
That allows you to see a wide view behind the boat in lieu of an observer.
You're watching the Trempealeau County Outdoors. We're talking with Megan Jensen and boating safety for our summer months and into the fall too. And one thing that is a requirement for boats also that we didn't talk about yet is a fire extinguisher.
Yep. So any motorboat that has closed compartments, I know it's kind of hard to see in my boat for folks at home, but I have storage compartments. I have a live well in here.
Mm-hmm.
Or if a boat, say, has like a false floor in it, someone puts down a floor on the bottom of a john boat, any area that has a compartment where gas vapors could build up
Okay.
needs to have a fire extinguisher by law. Even though it might not be required for your boat, might be a good idea too. Even though you're on water, boats are still capable of catching on fire, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. But any boat that has those closed compartments needs to have a fire extinguisher on board.
And hand in hand with having that fire extinguisher is also properly storing the battery that's operating your boat.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's one thing that we check when we talk with folks is their battery. Batteries need to be secured in the boat, and they also have to have the terminals covered. Again, as we're looking at it, we want to make sure that fires aren't occurring on boats. There's no arcing between the terminals. So they make actually little covers that you can put over the terminals. A lot of our boating laws are put in place for safety reasons,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a prime example. So try and remind folks when I see them out there with battery terminals that aren't covered or batteries that aren't secure to get it taken care of so
Right.
that they're a little bit safer out there on the water.
Absolutely. You don't want your battery going overboard
No.
either. You don't want to have to roll yourself back to shore
No.
if you don't have to. And kind of hand in hand with the fire extinguishers and some of the other safety things we've been talking about is the chance of accident. You hate to think about it, but it can happen, and it's nice to know really without a whole lot of thought what to do if something like that were to occur. So Megan, can you kind of tell me step one, what to do if I am in some type of boating accident?
Sure. And that's why we have a lot of these safety rules in place to hopefully prevent that. But even with the best prevention, accidents still can occur. With any accident, if there's a chance of someone not surviving, that's our first and foremost concern.
Okay.
We want to make sure that everyone's safe, but 911 is always going to be your best bet to get someone there as quick as possible, especially if there's life-threatening injuries that way. So, if someone is in a boat accident, call 911. We can get you the help there as soon as possible. But there is a legal requirement with that to anyone who is involved in a boating accident that results in a loss of life,
Mm-hmm.
a complete loss of the vessel, property damage over $2,000, or someone who seeks medical treatment above first aid. Any of those are what we consider a reportable boating accident.
Okay.
And with those, you need to both verbally and in written form communicate that with the Department of Natural Resources. Verbally can be done with either calling local law enforcement agency, either here in Trempealeau County, the Trempealeau County Sheriff's Department, or Trempealeau PD, or local warden, and notify us of that boating accident. That way we can come out and talk with you, see what happened, provide any assistance if needed, and then there is a requirement to notify the department in written format. We actually have a form on the DNR website for
Okay.
boating accidents. If you go on the DNR website and Just type in boat accident in the search bar, it will pop up. It's a PDF fillable form.
Okay.
You can fill that all online, and that needs to be submitted in days by the operator. But again, I can't stress enough, if it's an emergency situation, boat accident, call 911 right away. We'd rather come out and find everyone safe than have there be an emergency and no one called. So, report the boat accident as soon as possible to law enforcement, and then fill out the form.
And last but not least, before we move on to talk about some fishing rules and regulations, can we briefly talk a little bit about intoxication in boat operation? Are there legal limits for that, and does it mimic the same as a car on the roadways, or are there separate rules?
Yeah, so it's very similar. It almost parallels the rules of the road, in that you can't operate a motorboat while under the influence of intoxication or controlled substance, so drugs. And you can't operate a motorboat with a blood alcohol concentration above a 0.08. So very similar to vehicles in that respect. When you're out on the water, it's summertime, folks like to go out and enjoy themselves, and that's fine, but it has to be done within the legal limits and moderation. Always safest to have a designated driver. One thing that we don't always realize is that when we're out on the water is that there's other elements that we're maybe not used to if we're drinking, say, at home in the backyard. We've got wave action, we have boats going by. The sun's
warm, you could be dehydrated on top of that. You just added
weather. So boating is very popular in the summer and year round in the area. So we want to make sure folks are safe, but in the summer there is that increased amount of boat traffic. Folks gather on sandbars and such, and we want to make sure people are safe. So it's always best to not drink and drive, have a designated driver, but really remember that you can't boat under the influence of intoxicant or a controlled substance, and that you can't operate a boat with a blood alcohol concentration greater than 0.08.
Gotcha. All great information so far. You've been watching the Trempealeau County Outdoors. We'll be right back with a look at some of your fishing regulations. Thanks for tuning in to the Trempealeau County Outdoors. I'm John Kelly. I'm joined with Conservation Warden Megan Jensen, and earlier part of the show we were talking about boating safety, and hand in hand with boating safety is fishing regulations. Can you tell me a little bit about who needs a license to fish and how do you get a license? Yeah,
so anyone over 16 years of age needs to have a fishing license. It's very easy to get. You can go online and do it at home. Go to the DNR's Go Wild website. Take care of it all online using a credit card, or you can go into a DNR service center or to one of the many licensing agencies that we have throughout the state. So very convenient to get. Anyone over the age of 16 must have that fishing license to go out fishing.
Gotcha. And let's talk for a minute about trout fishing. It's a popular activity here in Trempealeau County. Can you tell me about the trout stamp and who needs it and why you need it?
Yeah, so like a fishing license, the trout stamp is something special for trout anglers that they have to have in addition to their fishing license if they're pursuing trout. Whether or not they're catching and releasing or catching and keeping. For folks who are going out to pursue trout, they have to have not only their fishing license but also the trout stamp in addition to that. So, and since Trempealeau County does have quite a few trout streams in the area, it's a popular activity, especially at the start of the season. Always like to remind folks that in addition to the license, they need to have that trout stamp.
Sure. And then with the different species of fish, are there different seasons for them per se? And once again, is that something that can be found on the DNR website? Yeah,
so that's a great question. And Trempealeau County is a little unique in that we have different areas in the county. Right now we're on the Mississippi River, which is considered a Minnesota-Wisconsin boundary water. And then you can see actually off to our left here we have the railroad tracks, and on the other side of those railroad tracks is considered inland waters.
Sure.
So depending on if you're fishing in the boundary waters or if you're fishing inland waters, there are different seasons bag limits, could be size restrictions. So it's really important that you know where you're fishing, and then you check the regulations for that body of water to ensure that you're following the regulations appropriate for that body of water, because there are differences between what's allowed on the Mississippi River compared to the inland waters. So regulations, we've talked about it, I think, every time we get together, and I stress the regulations, but they're really your go-to. They're going to tell you what those season limits are, bag limits, size limits for fish. I could tell them over the air, but it's easier to look because I don't want to miss anything, and I want to make sure that folks get familiar with looking those up for the species they're going after. But the regulations are also available online. You can actually even download them onto your phone if you have a smartphone.
There you go.
Have the electronic version on there just in case you don't have internet service where you're out fishing. But otherwise you can get the paper copy from places where you buy a license, DNR Service Center, or pull it up from the DNR website.
And for fishing, different species of fish, you might have different poles, different bait, lures, things like that. Is there any limit to what I can have on my vessel for the different types of fishing I may be doing?
Yep, that's a great question. So you can have up to 3 poles, baits, or lures. So you could have one pole out, but if it had 3 separate baited hooks, that would be your 3. Or you could have 3 poles out with a single baited hook or lure on it. Now, some of those lures that we use for bass, northerns, might have multiple hooks on the single lure, but that is a component. That lure is a component. And the regulations, help explain that too. But it's 3 baits, hooks, or lures.
Excellent information, and as always, if you have any questions, go ahead and check out the DNR website, and that could help fill you in. There's some contact information there too. You've been watching the Trempealeau County Outdoors. This has been our fishing segment, and we'll be right back with a little bit on some invasive species. Thanks again for tuning in and staying with us here on the Trempealeau County Outdoors. We just got off the water, and Megan, you're getting ready to leave the boat landing, and there's some things people should know about aquatic invasive species, otherwise referred to as AIS.
Yep.
And sorry, I was gonna say, is there something you can tell us about those?
Yeah,
species?
sure. So, we've been talking about aquatic invasive species for years, and I think folks are starting to become familiar with that terminology. But basically, aquatic invasive species is a non-native, could be a plant or an animal, something that's non-native that gets introduced in some form and takes over or competes with our native species.
Okay.
And it can have not only environmental impacts on our natural resources, but can also have impacts that affect our recreation, our economy. And so we want to be on the forefront of really protecting our bodies of water from the spread of aquatic invasive species.
So can we go over a couple of quick steps to kind of check our boat to make sure that we're ready to leave the landing and that we're not carrying anything with us?
The first step is to do a visual inspection of your boat, your trailer, any gear inside, and do just a 360 walk around. Make sure that there is nothing on there. And if you do find any vegetation or maybe some say zebra mussels or other aquatic animal that's been attached or stuck on your boat or gear, you want to make sure you remove that before you leave the landing. It's not something that you can wait till you get home to do. You have to do it before you leave the landing. Make sure you pull that off. If there's a trash can there, you can empty things out into the trash can. But very important, it is a violation to transport aquatic animals or aquatic plants and animals on a trailer or boat on roads in Wisconsin.
Sure.
So that's why we stress doing it beforehand. And then one of the big questions I get is, well, what about my fish?
Sure.
What can I do with my fish? So when you're out on the body of water, you can have your fish in a live well. That's perfectly fine. But as soon as you get off the water, before you leave, you need to drain all that water from your live well. Part of that...
Still on the landing.
Still on the landing, yep. Because part of that prevention of the spread of aquatic invasive species. We've looked at our boat, our trailer, our gear. We've done that inspection. We've removed any aquatic animals or plants that shouldn't be on there. The third one is to drain all the water from our boat.
Okay.
So that could include pulling your plug and letting the water drain out from, they got splashed in there as folks were coming and going from water skiing or swimming, or from the live well where we've been keeping fish. All the water needs to be drained out of the boat before you leave the landing. With fish, the question comes off, well, how do I get my fish, especially in the summer when it's warm?
How do I keep them cold?
So you still need to drain your live well because you are not allowed to transport live fish. For the purposes of this, we consider fish dead when they're out of water.
Okay.
So they might still be in there and they might flop around, but for the sake of the law, we consider fish dead when they're out of water.
Okay.
So, but you can absolutely throw ice packs in there, a bag of ice, something to keep them cool, keep them fresh so they're tasty for dinner when you eat them. And then the question that comes up is, well, what about my minnows?
Yeah.
There is an exemption for minnows. First off, all minnows have to be purchased from a licensed bait dealer.
Okay.
So that makes a big difference. But you can transport up to 2 gallons of water for your minnows away from the body of water. So as long as it's at minnow waters for the minnows, you can transport your minnows away. And I get a lot of questions about how and where I can use minnows, and you know, the law's changed a little bit over the years, but right now you have to buy your minnows from a licensed bait dealer.
Okay.
You take those minnows, if you go to a body of water and you use them, as long as no fish are put back into that bucket that have been in, say, the water you were fishing on, and you didn't put any water from that lake or river or body of water into that bucket, you can actually use those minnows on any body of water.
Oh, okay.
But if you're out there and you're fishing and it's time to go home and you have a lively minnow on it and you want to save it, you can put it back in that bucket, but then that whole bucket of minnows can water.
Okay.
So again, our fishing regulations do a really good job of outlining that we want to make sure that we protect our bodies of water from aquatic invasive species. So that's why we have so many of these regulations in place to make sure we prevent the further spread of aquatic invasive species.
And as we always say, if you have any questions, go ahead, check out the DNR website. It'll tell you just about everything you need to know, whether you're hunting, hiking, fishing, or camping. And there's some good contact information on there as well. I want to thank you all for watching the Trempealeau County Outdoors. Megan, thanks so much for taking us through and touring us on the Mississippi today.
Yeah, you're welcome.